talking tonight about a revolution of values, psychological research on materialism and its alternatives. And the title of my talk comes from a speech that Martin Luther King Jr. gave in the late 1960s. He gave the following quote. He said, "We as a nation must undergo a radical revolution of values. We must rapidly begin the shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society." Now, that was more than 40 years ago, and I think one of the things that's extremely clear in my nation is that this revolution never came to pass. Economic growth is what politicians are very concerned with, and about 70% of economic activity in the United States depends directly on consumer spending, and is that it becomes a patriotic act to go to the mall. Now, what all of these messages end up telling us is the following: that happiness is for sale, that we can find happiness at the mall, on the internet, and in various catalogs for $9.99 or pounds, that it's important and perhaps patriotic to work so you can go make a lot of money, so then you can take that money and go consume so somebody else can have a job, and that life is meaningful and people are successful to the extent that they have money, possessions, and the right image. We can see advertisements almost everywhere nowadays. Okay, they put them in the beach sand, actually. You can find them in the toilets. Obviously, they're on your cell phones and your Facebook pages. A lot of people I talk to, when I give this kind of stuff, they're like, well, I don't pay any attention to ads when I see them. It's actually the absolute worst thing you can do, okay? Because what the research shows is that it's when you're not paying attention that the messages get in. It's when you do pay attention and you invest cognitive energy in trying to keep those out and interpret them that you are able to stop it. The reason that I tend to focus on children is a couple of things. First off, children are more psychologically vulnerable than are adults. Okay? Most of us have pretty much set our identities more or less. Maybe we'll have some shifts, it could happen, okay? But more or less we are who we're going to be till we die. Kids are still figuring it out, and marketers know that. And that's why they want to get them early. That's why they target them, because they understand that if they can get them to think of themselves as consumers early on, they've got them for another 50, 70 years. You have a value system. Every single one of you has a value system. And I'd like you to think of that value system as being like a big pie, okay, that has different slices. So you have your go to church slice and be spiritual slice. You have your have a lot of fun and be hedonistic slice. You have your spend time with family slice. And you have your slice about making money. And everybody has different slices. But that's what this method allows us to do, is to get a sense of how important is materialism to you, is money, is image, is status to you, in the context of all other things that you might care about. What I'm interested in is, what do you want? How much do you desire money? Because that's fundamentally what consumer society wants us to do, is to believe that money is important. And what we found was actually that the more people cared about materialism, the bigger their slice of pie for materialism, the lower their happiness. So it's not that money can't buy happiness, it's that materialism actually seems to undermine happiness. And one of the things that we know is that part of the reason that we have so many of the ecological problems we have with regard to climate disruption, with regard to biodiversity loss, with regard to pollution, is because of humanity's seemingly unending desire for more and more stuff. The more people care about materialism, the less likely they are to engage in positive environmental behaviors. Materialism is a problem, what are we going to do about it? Okay, what's the approach? How can we deal with materialism both at a personal, individual level and at a societal level in order to hopefully make some shifts so that people can be happier, society can function better, and maybe we can have a world to give to our grandchildren which we won't be ashamed to give to them. The first thing we have to do is we have to figure out what causes materialism, and we have to get rid of those. The second thing we have to do is we have to figure out what the healthy values are, and we need to enlarge those so that materialism shrinks. Television, both in the commercials and in the underlying shows themselves oftentimes, have all kinds of messages which suggest that a happy life is attained by making money and having possessions. same values that oppose materialism, are the same values that tend to make people happy, are the same values that tend to promote positive social behaviors, are the same values that tend to promote ecological sustainability. So voluntary simplicity, I'm assuming, is a term that's probably somewhat familiar to many of you. It's a focus on what Dwayne Elgin called a lifestyle that is inwardly rich, in which people care about personal growth, family, volunteering, and ecological activity. The first thing was that we found that voluntary simplifiers compared to the mainstream Americans were happier. They were significantly happier than the mainstream Americans. They were more satisfied with their lives, experienced more pleasant emotion and less unpleasant emotion. This is particularly interesting given that the voluntary simplifiers only have about 2/3 of the annual income of the mainstream Americans. This is the kind of thing, actually, which I think would fit very nicely with TTT, is simplicity circles, which are basically support groups for people trying to live more simply, to get together and to share ideas, but also to get some support for trying to live differently and outside of mainstream society. Unlike the GNP, which values one thing, money, these alternative indicators incorporate other values, like, do people volunteer? Are people happy? I've tried to demonstrate to you the problems that we have with materialism and the necessity of changing both our lifestyles and social practices, and the need to both decrease materialistic messages in our environment, to increase general security, and to increase opportunities for expressing intrinsic values.
Corporations are wondering what they're gonna do. Politicians are figuring how to blame it on me and you. By now you've realized that we've all been hypnotized. It's not looking good, Ellen, I'm sure you will agree that we can't buy everything forever. No